Okay, good afternoon. I hope everybody's managed to enjoy some lunch. I can't say I've quite managed to enjoy my lunch, but speaking after lunch, but anyway. My name's Clare Langton. I've been asked to come here and speak this afternoon about what we do at my school, helping to develop social skills with students, with all students, not just with students on the autistic spectrum. So what's going to happen, hopefully, we're going to just highlight some of the communication difficulties that we've experienced at our mainstream secondary school for 11 to 16-year-olds, and what the impact of ASC communication difficulties has on our young people. Also, I'd like to try and highlight the impact that the interactions that they have, the reciprocal implications, making friendships, etc. And also how we can help to support and develop some of the strategies that we use and that we teach at Pre-Snol, and then how we've actually managed to build on those strategies and those successes to develop the skills even further. So we don't kind of rest on our laurels, we do keep trying to build on what's gone before. I know, yes, and there'll be an opportunity for questions at the end if anybody has any. So initially, communication and interaction. Almost everything that we do involves speech, language and communication. Even if we're just sat quietly, you know, having a bit of rest or meaningful thinking time, we're still communicating with our body language what we're actually doing. We use it in all aspects of our lives, making relationships, building relationships, whether it's learning or friendships or even with their family social groups. We are constantly using these skills. And really, for most of us, these skills we take for granted. We pick them up as we go along. We just expect that everybody else is at the same pace as us, understanding what we're saying at the same time. We might think we're making ourselves clear, but for our young people on the autistic spectrum, it can actually be extremely difficult to interpret what people are saying and what they mean if we're not very clear and we're not very specific. Also, autism is a lifelong condition. It's the symptoms, the traits of autism can be improved and worked upon. I mean, we've discussed a lot of that kind of thing today with strategies that we introduce, many strategies, and really good practice. And very specific interventions, whether it's group work, one-to-one, and getting them involved. But the idea is really to sort of build on those strategies. How do we know that our young people are actually using those strategies once they've left the environment that you've been teaching them in? And I think that was one of the most challenging things that we decided to have a look at Pre-Snol, was how can we actually help them to achieve their full potential given the strategies that we've been teaching. How do we know they're using them? If you ask them at the end of the day or a week later or a month later, have you been, you know, holding a conversation with somebody, a two-way conversation, and if they've just sat there on the receiving end of a conversation just saying yeah, yeah, they may well think that they've had a conversation with the other person when really they've just sat quite passive really and not actually interacted. So it's how do we make sure that they're actually using and developing those skills. Some of the typical difficulties that we see are the marked non-verbal communication, facial expression, limited eye contact, body language, all of these things that people working with people on the autistic spectrum are well aware of. But we see these all the time, and Gareth mentioned it earlier this morning, is the facial expressions. How do young people recognise and interpret, especially when they're in sort of social times at school in particular, where you see cliques of students who get together because they're into this, that or the other. you've got the young person who wants to try and interact with these other people, but they absolutely have no skills whatsoever to actually go and, you know, initiate a conversation. And also an inability to share interests and the achievements of others. Quite often, our experience has been that they're not really very interested in what other people have got to say about their specific interests unless it actually is linked to what their interest is. But they'll quite happily talk to you at great length about hoovers, apparently, as Linda was mentioning earlier. Also difficulty engaging in age-appropriate relationships. Sometimes that is a huge difficulty in itself. Some of our young people come across as very verbally capable, and you know, people have an assumption that they're quite mature and have an excellent vocabulary, but in actual fact, emotionally they find it very difficult to regulate those emotions and can do some extremely immature things which can either shock or surprise people. I was again at a conference with Gareth on Tuesday, and we took one of our young people, one of our young students along with us, and she was quite happy to sort of go along and tell her story. And we prepared her for, normally she can't speak to people if she's not been introduced to everybody, but it was a group of people roughly the size of this, maybe a little bit smaller, so I had to explain to her that I couldn't possibly introduce everybody to it because we'd be there till Christmas. So we managed to come up with an idea of how we could get round that, and we just treated it as one whole group, so it was actually just one whole group. And she was very focused and very calm, and she spoke absolutely fantastically. She was very highly commended by the audience and some of the people who came to speak to her afterwards. You know, they thought, oh, she was so mature, year 10 student. But in the taxi on the way back to school, she was just jumping down and jumping up and down. She was, you know, I can't believe what I've just done. And she was just all over the place. And I thought, you see, the difference between how people sometimes perceive our students and the reality of how they can react in very either exciting or giddy situations is quite markedly different. Obviously reciprocal communication is a really, really tricky one. It's one of the things that we do focus on quite a lot, because if you want to make friendships, which a lot of them do, you have to actually work at it. You know, the other person isn't always going to do the work for you. We teach them a lot of strategies around this, and they know what they should do, but when they actually go out into the social time and into life itself, they actually can't do it. They know what they should be doing, and sometimes they think that they might be doing it, but they actually can't do it. So these are some of the types of difficulties that we do see. Non-verbal communication. There's some research that suggests that at least 50% of what we communicate is through non-verbal communication. And I think this is a huge sticking point for some of our students when they're trying to build relationships with their own peer groups. They really do misinterpret people's moods, emotions, how they might be thinking or feeling. It's very, very hard for them to negotiate that. And that's another area that we do focus on quite a lot, and we do help them with specific interventions in order to be able to do that. Because misunderstanding non-verbal communication often leaves our students very confused, frustrated, sometimes angry, and it can result in confrontations, it can result in really sort of a poor outcome. And the student not maybe wanting to go back into a particular lesson or interact with a specific teacher, which can affect a subject for the rest of the year. I've just included a little quote here which I thought was quite appropriate. The most common mistake and attribution that has been brought to my attention is that the person on the spectrum engages in particularly odd behaviour to annoy the people around them or to be disrespectful. Now, if you work with young people on the autistic spectrum, I'm sure you've heard this kind of thing before. And I've even heard it within my environment. You know, thankfully it's rare, but it happens, and it's this perception that young people are deliberately annoying the other person to get a rise out of them, or deliberately being disrespectful to the teacher, which I think Linda referred to a little bit earlier on. And it does imply that there's some kind of intent behind the behaviour. But I remember going into a classroom one time. I was asked to observe this young person and his interactions, because it felt that there was some difficulty there. And as I observed him, the group was asked to do the class was asked to get into groups and do some group work, and it was clear that he didn't have any skills to engage in the conversation that was meant to be going on. But what he did was he looked around the room and he chose a group, and what he did was he went over, just kind of sidled over, and then sort of pushed a pencil case on the floor, and that got somebody's reaction, you see, and they were like, and that's how he kind of started his interaction with that particular group. But what was happening was he did this all of the time, and as a result it became annoying to his peer group, and they just thought he was deliberately being annoying and trying to make them angry and you know, engage in sort of negative behaviour. When in actual fact the young person just really did not know. That was his way of solving his problem of trying to get into a group of young people to start the task that had been set. So it really is about trying to raise the awareness not just of the young people that they're working with, but the actual young person themselves. So how do we support our students with ASC to overcome some of the barriers of social communication? Now at Priestnall we have developed some bespoke programmes for our young people, and really what I'm trying to do today is tell you about our journey and what we've learned and how we've developed good practice from what's gone before, and you know, mistakes that we've made, and we've kind of found a way of working that seems to work within the whole school ethos, which Gareth mentioned earlier, which he's quite passionate about. I'll just talk a little bit about those, if that's okay. So some of the interventions that we do include speech and language therapy programmes. They can be group work. We tend not to work with groups larger than 6 to 8 really, because that's a large enough group for turn taking and conversation skills and things like that. But we do tend to have 2 members of staff that run these groups, because the communication needs are such that it requires that significant type of intervention. And from that, what we do is we may then be able to identify further needs or very specific communication difficulties with some of our students. So we will then do a further programme that is then sort of honed around their specific needs. So again, it's very bespoke. It's looking at the individual and the young person, and you know, sort of observing, asking them questions, what they find difficult, and then building a programme around that. So it's very, very specific to the individual, so you could never sort of prescript that. It's literally as you work through. And also we do have one-to-one interventions. Again, that's usually under the leadership of the speech and language therapist that's allocated to our school from the local authority. And if they set very specific programmes, that's what we work to. But we do try to then bring that into the wider area. We also offer a counselling programme or therapeutic intervention for some of our students. It's offered to all our students, not just the students on the autistic spectrum, but mainstream as well. And that has proved to be one of the most significant interventions that we've introduced to date, because again, you introduce all the strategies. There's a lot of background knowledge now to what we should be doing to help and aid our students to be inclusive and to sort of feel part of the school life. but in particular we have students on the autistic spectrum with Asperger's syndrome whose sort of thinking and thought processes can really lead to quite low self-esteem and low moods, and we found this time and time again, and we wondered what we could do to try and address this without, like Gareth was saying earlier, going through the process of applying to CAMS and the lengthy process that takes to, you know, be able to offer something that really we needed, you know, 6 months ago. And what it allows the young person to do is to build a relationship with somebody that they feel secure with within the school. They have a relationship outside of the therapeutic room, and so the trust is there, and they feel able to explore thoughts and feelings that really they've never actually expressed to anybody else before. And they may think they're sort of strange or weird or should be, you know, sort of kept locked up in the cellar somewhere for thinking these things, when in actual fact, when they work through them, they realise that they're quite normal and their self-esteem, you know, does begin to rise. And that's been hugely beneficial as part of the holistic approach that we have at Pre-SNOL. So just a little bit about the speech and language programme. It was developed in conjunction with a speech and language therapist. We tried to run it over a 6-week period. It can fluctuate a little bit depending on the needs of the group, but it tends to run over a 6-week period. And we work on the emotions and feelings of the young person with autism, and also the emotions and feelings of other people, how to recognise them, how to understand them. You know, sometimes you might have a young person where there was a young lady the other day where a parent came up and asked her a question, and she was so overwhelmed by the answer that the parent started to cry. And the young lady said to me afterwards, she said, well, I just didn't know what to do. So I said to her, I hope you don't start crying in front of me. And she proceeded to cry in front of her, you know. She said, I just didn't know what to do. And because they don't, it's like they might have unpredictable behaviour, but you as an adult who's not on the spectrum, you're not meant to have that kind of unpredictable behaviour. So when it happens, they really don't know what to do. So we do a lot of work on that. One of the other areas is obviously joining conversations appropriately. Like I said earlier about the young man who just used to push things off the desk to try and get people's attention because he really didn't know how to go in and start or initiate a conversation. So a lot of our work is based on trying to develop positive friendships, because you can have an A-star student who's getting all the grades in the world, fantastic, but has absolutely no social skills and is depressed because he's finding it very hard to make friends and be a part of somebody and feeling very isolated and very different. So we do feel that it's just as important as maths, English and science. And it's, as I said, it's over a 6-week period, and the students are encouraged to use the strategies that they have learned both with their peer group and adults alike, whether it's parents, teachers, extended members of the family, whoever. And that's kind of where we got to before we started looking at a whole school intervention to try and involve all students, because we knew we were teaching all of these strategies, but we were not always 100% sure whether they were actually out there using them. The counselling and therapeutic intervention, which I was talking about a little bit earlier, this specific intervention is offered to students who are experiencing high levels of anxiety, because anybody working with autism knows that the anxiety is one of the biggest barriers to them learning or interacting with anybody. If they cannot get over their anxieties, sometimes they can't even set foot across the threshold into school. And we have had students who've successfully gone through school who literally did have a massive difficulty just, you know, setting foot across the threshold. Once they were in the school, they were fine. But actually getting them across the threshold, the anxiety levels were so high that there'd be massive tantrums outside the front of the school, and the mother would be mortified because other parents were looking and watching and thinking, you know, look at that kid having a tantrum. It's a massive issue. Right, so each student is unique, even though they share very similar stereotypical traits. Offering this type of intervention does allow the person to explore who they are and, you know, what their autism means to them, and also how other people may be interpreting who they are because of some of the sort of behaviours or traits that they have. The interventions that we do introduce at Presnell, they are aimed at developing strategies for the young people to overcome the socially isolating barriers that they have. And just sort of going back to the non-verbal communication earlier, it's how do these young people manage to interpret. It's like Gareth said, these faces look a little bit angry, but they might be talking about, you know, who lost the football or who won it. Well, maybe not the ladies, but, you know, they might be talking about X Factor or something like that. But they might think, why are they looking at me like that? Why are they looking at me in such an angry way? What have I done? Oh, I'm never going to speak to those people, or whatever it might be. Also, I've just popped in another little quote here, is they seemed odd to others and others seemed odd to them. That's something that I've often come across. Young people with autism, or in my experience, they do feel different and they do feel odd, but they don't necessarily know why. And that's why some of the interventions that we have been really useful. So hopefully, with these interventions that we are working on, we're enabling them to become more confident socially and allowing them to grow and develop at their own pace in a very safe, understanding and nurturing environment, which hopefully then will lead to successful outcomes. And that, to be honest, with the intervention that I'm going to talk to you about next, has been our experience. Not all of our students on the spectrum access this intervention that we've developed at Presnell. Some people who are actually interested in what I'm going to talk about actually choose not to attend any of the groups that we run on this. But that's entirely their choice. That, you know, there is no pressure, but very interesting all the same. So how do we measure the outcomes of the interventions that we use? Well, one of them is Manga. Now, I don't know if anybody's heard of Manga before. Has anybody heard of Manga? Yeah, a few people. I mean, I think if you work with young people, or certainly young people on the spectrum, then Manga and anime is something that is actually a huge interest. Now, I discovered this purely by accident, but it's the school and some of our students have benefited from it hugely, and we now run what we call a Manga club. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about how the Manga group came about, and the benefits that some of our students have gained from it, which have been absolutely tremendous. So just a little bit about Manga for those that don't actually know what Manga is. It is a Japanese word for comic, and a comic, if you remember from years ago, is like a bit like a comic strip story. It's told in picture form. It's a story that's told in picture form, but it also has a little bit of writing that goes along with it. And it's an artistic storytelling style, and it's actually becoming more and more popular in Western countries, leading many to believe that it's actually a quite recent, relatively modern thing, but actually, if you look into it a little bit, it's been around for thousands of years in Japan. And it's the tradition of telling stories with a series of sequential images, which tell a story from beginning, middle and end, and it actually usually starts at the back of a book. So where we're used to opening a book from right to left, it's actually the other way around, and it's left to right. So you actually start reading the book from the back and you work your way forward. So who can access Manga? Well, it's literally anyone who has an interest in it. Anybody who has an interest in animation or graphic arts. They can have any level of ability, so unable to draw at all, a bit like me, or you can actually be, you know, fantastic. Everybody gets something out of it. It doesn't matter what your skill level is. Also, anyone who's interested in video games, so which I'm sure you're all aware of. I think Gareth even mentioned that some of our students, 1 or 2 of them, actually have video PlayStation as a reward time. And also animation, and the cartoons that Linda was referring to earlier, she was saying how, you know, cartoons can be quite useful. Well, there is a cartoon version of manga which is called anime, and you may already be aware of that. Some of the most recent programs, things like Dragon Ball Z, Ben 10, Naruto, things like that. I don't know if anybody's heard of them. And there've also been some feature-length animations at the cinema. So they've proved very, very popular. Now, there's been a bit of debate as to why it's so popular, and everybody has a different opinion, so it's like, well, how long is a piece of string? As we know, a lot of our students do have very, very specific interests, you know, whether it's Doctor Who, or as Gareth was referring to one of our students earlier, somebody who's interested in the universe, planets, etc. There's no real rhyme or reason, really. But one thing that we do know is that it doesn't just appeal to our students on the autistic spectrum, it actually appeals to all of our students across the whole school. And this is where sort of part of the idea of developing an intervention that would include all students and not just students on the autistic spectrum in isolation. Because what you find is a lot of the strategies and interventions that we do have for students on the spectrum, they are taught in isolation from the rest of the school, really. So the strategies, the speech and language therapy, all of those things tend to be independent of a whole school. So you might have a group of young people on the autistic spectrum who are having speech and language input, where doing small group work, but they're all on the spectrum. They're not necessarily, you know, mainstream. So we were looking to try and develop the skills. Because if you remember earlier when Gareth was talking about whole school inclusion, and the whole school is literally saturated with the autism training, from the office staff, caretakers, canteen staff, to the head teacher, support staff and teaching staff, so that everybody is aware. And we also have assemblies and PCHSE classes for every single year group, so that everybody is 100% aware of what these kinds of needs are. But actually working with them is slightly different. There are no interventions that actually include everybody. Well, there wasn't in pre-SNOL. So a little bit about pre-SNOL's journey. How did we actually build this successful intervention to include both the autistic students and the mainstream students? Well, the journey actually began with a Year 8 student called Hashim, and he had a very, very specific interest in manga and anime, which, as far as I'm aware, you know, by the time we got to Year 8, I don't think there were many staff in school that were aware of this. I certainly wasn't aware of it. And also a desire to support ASC students to develop their social skills and their self-esteem, really, because self-esteem is sort of at the root of them growing and blossoming into young people who can achieve their full potential. Oh yes, and some good old-fashioned good luck, because the way this actually grew was purely by chance, really, and there was a lot of ad hoc things that came into being when this first came about, and so it's again not prescriptive. It was just a little bit of old-fashioned good luck. So the Year 8 student Hashim, it was about developing a relationship with him, really, because he did come under the partnership that Gareth mentioned earlier, where he had a dual role at pre-SNOL, which is just an average mainstream secondary school with no, you know, specialist history with autism, and but he was on dual role with a school that was a specialist school for students with autism, and the dual role was because when he couldn't cope, or any of the students that came under that provision couldn't cope in mainstream, they could go there and spend some time there until they felt, you know, able to come back. Now with Hashim, he'd, you know, spent the whole of year 7 and part of year 8 not interacting with students at Priestnall. He really only communicated with people through his support workers. Very, very shy and very, very sceptical about anyone and everyone. And it just so happened that one day he happened to mention something that I thought, oh, I know what that is. And so I had a chat with him about it. And he just could not believe that somebody like me knew exactly what he was talking about. I knew everything that was going on, and he could sort of relate with me in a way that he obviously just couldn't believe, really. And as we did talk about it, his trust with me grew. And for the first time, he spoke to me, which he saw me as a member of Priestnall staff and not a member of his staff. And this interaction took place, and people just were so amazed, really, because we hadn't seen it previously. And when you say if you can find a way into their special interest, this is that, you know, really does highlight the importance of being able to find that interest and, you know, sort of develop things and grow things from that. And also, I think consistency was key, because you know, he knew he could come and talk to me about it. So if he was having a bad day and he needed to speak to Mrs. Langton, he knew that that could happen. We could make that happen for him. And that was very, very important in actually building the trust for him to be able to cross over from this idea of him being part of another unit actually into the Priestnall environment. So, and it was fun as well. So the first seeds, okay. How did we utilise this breakthrough? Well, Mr. Morwood, Gareth, managed to acquire some funding, and we had what we call a Notions of Self Day, where students at Priestnall were encouraged to look at themselves and sort of evaluate what goes on in their life to help them become who they are. Which is quite a big and quite a deep concept for some of our students, whether they're on the autistic spectrum or not. And it involved a manga workshop, because what we realised from Hashim was that if we could develop something around his specific interest, and other students were interested as well, that actually we may be able to develop some positive relationships with other people, even just interactions, because like I say, he didn't speak with other students at the school at this point. There was a dance and music workshop, and there was also an art workshop. But the manga workshop is sort of my main focus of today's talk. But there is a little video that goes with it, and it's only 5 minutes long. So if you don't mind, you know, sort of having a rest from me for a few minutes, I'll play it for you. So that really was just to give a little bit of insight into something that happened a couple of years ago now, and the manga workshop that day, there were a lot of students in there, some who were on the spectrum and some who weren't, and Hashi was one of the students who went into the workshop that day. He didn't speak to anybody, he didn't speak to any of the students. He did have some interaction with Naomi, who was running the workshop, but very little really. One of the first things that he'd done that he had never actually done before, and this was key really, was he wouldn't commit himself to a piece of work, whether it was writing or a piece of artwork, if he could not do a perfect job of it, because he could only ever produce something perfect. To produce something with a mistake in it, the concept of doing that was just too traumatic for him. But on this occasion, because he used to trace and use light boxes to do all of his artwork, and we weren't really aware whether he did have any skill or not. But on this occasion, he spent the whole day drawing for the first time freehand, and he produced one piece of work which was absolutely amazing, and you know, nobody could believe what they were seeing because they'd only ever seen him tracing before. And he actually produced this one piece of artwork that was all his own work, and there was such a fuss made of it that he was just so proud of himself that, again, this boosting this self-esteem and sort of letting him know that actually he's good at something, you know, it was just amazing. And he actually spent 6 hours on this, 6 whole hours. He would not come away to try, you know, it was like, please, you know, everyone go, we need to have lunch or break or anything, you know, but no, he was one of the students that wanted to stay and wanted to complete this piece of work. It was that important to him. Now at this stage he did produce a very sort of perfect piece of artwork, and the way in which he did it was very intricate because he couldn't allow himself to not do this perfect piece of artwork. And so the challenge for us subsequently after this particular day was to actually help him learn that it's okay to make mistakes. You can make mistakes and you can actually repair them, and nobody's going to think, oh, well, you're rubbish, you know, you obviously can't do that, which is one of the things that was absolutely petrified of. And we managed to do that through the Manga Club, which was then born out of this particular manga day, this manga workshop. A couple of the things that we discovered was that word got out about this manga club. Word got out, not that it was a secret, but word got out, and throughout the day more and more students kept coming to have a go, and what I realised was that, oh, actually, you know, this is appealing to quite a large cross-section of our community within the school. So, yeah, I wonder what we can do with that kind of thing. And even some of the staff who were involved on the day got so excited because some of the skills that were being displayed on that day and being taught on that day, they actually started using and they actually produced. So they were also enthused by this manga club. And so out of that's how the social club was born, really. And it's a group that I say a group, it's a club that we run currently twice a week. Initially we ran it during 2 lunch times because one definitely wasn't enough. So we ran it on a Monday and a Friday lunchtime, so it was like a positive beginning to the week, even though it's a Monday lunchtime, but also a positive experience at the end of the week on a Friday. And that was the idea, but we were so overwhelmed with numbers that we had to move it from a lunchtime, and we do still run one lunchtime club, but we actually now run a full hour on a Monday evening, just to really accommodate the numbers and the enthusiasm for watching either a film or a series of short animations. And yeah, it's something that they can share with like-minded people, and nobody seems to notice, you know, who's on the spectrum, who isn't on the spectrum, who's got dyslexia, who doesn't have it. You know, none of that seems to go on at all. So there is an agenda for the students, and there is an agenda for the staff, as always. But the student agenda is basically to have fun, is to be relaxed and enjoy the atmosphere that is Manga Club. It's not curriculum based. There are no tests in this. There is no format that they have to learn. There are no theories behind what they have to learn. There is absolutely no pressure in that sense. So it is just purely enjoyment, and it's actually something that's within the school environment. You know, whoa, who could have imagined that you could actually have fun in school? So their thing is, because they're very keen, they do like to draw, they like to talk about it. Some of the things they talk about is just, you know, amazing, really. I've learnt so much about manga and anime, so it's stuff that, you know, like Linda was saying earlier, the things she learned about hoovers, well, you can see where we're going with that. And also, some of them have actually produced little short animations through some of the IT programs that we have in school, and also Photoshop, which is a big part of what they do as well. So it's really interesting. It's just literally a fun, it's a lovely place to be around. And they're able to express themselves through their own chosen interests, like I say, away from curriculum constraints. You know, like I say, there are no homeworks in this. There are no pressures at all, no exams, no anything. So one of the young ladies who comes to Manga Club, she's not on the spectrum at all. A very lovely young lady, Anna, and she produced this piece of work for today. And she said that she loves coming to Manga Club because she enjoys drawing manga pictures, and she's getting much better at it, and she gets to have a chat with her friends and to watch manga videos. So basically, she's just coming there to chill and chat with her friends. And what we found, what we're continuing to find, is that we've got different year groups, boys and girls, all mixing with each other. So it's not just their own peer group, it's older year groups mixing with younger year groups. So we've got some really good role models being developed there, and, you know, some very interesting conversations. And lots of debate about what they should watch and what they shouldn't watch. And now this young man, Peter, again, he isn't on the autistic spectrum, but he does have a twin brother who is on the autistic spectrum, and they both have an interest in manga. So I asked him, would he like to do a drawing for me for today? And he came back and he said, you know, I do really enjoy drawing manga myths, but I really like the Beatles at the moment, especially John Lennon, because he inspires me. And I said, well, I can't argue with that really, you know. But again, there's just because it's not manga doesn't mean to say that they can't enjoy, you know, drawing what they're interested in at that particular time. So staff agenda, that's me. So my agenda really within the Manga Club is to observe and encourage the interaction of the young people, because like I say, with all the other interventions that we've introduced at Priestnall, there is no real way for us to be able to observe them developing these friendship skills and these positive interactions with their own peer group, things that they thought they would never be able to do and are actually now doing on a regular basis. It's just phenomenal to see, really. So, you know, and I'm able to sort of be able to see this at first hand. And sort of help them to facilitate the use of the strategies that we have taught through the speech and language programmes and other interventions, like Mr Morwood was, I keep saying Mr Morwood because I feel like I'm in school, but you know, Gareth Morwood was saying earlier, we have an occupational therapy programme as well that helps to address sort of the motor skills side of the aspects of autism. Also, it gives us an ability to help nurture friendships in a very safe environment. And one of the most significant friendships that we managed to nurture in this environment was the one with Hashim, who didn't really have much interaction with most of his peer group. Went into about maybe 40% of his lessons, and would have issues within those lessons, could only stay for certain amounts of time. You know, all the kinds of things that Gareth was talking about earlier, you know, it could be anything that might trigger his anxiety level, and once his anxiety level was high, that was it. He couldn't cope in the classroom, he couldn't cope with students that annoyed him or that he perceived as being this, that or the other. You know, he had his own stereotype ideas about, you know, mainstream students. And therefore he didn't spend an awful lot of time in the classroom. In this environment, we were able to identify a friendship group. Well, he identified it himself, but we kind of nurtured it and helped it to grow, and we kind of engineered one or two situations to try and, you know, nurture that friendship in a very sort of safe environment. And that has gone from strength to strength, and over the past 2 years, you know, a student who sort of in year 8 was not interacting very well with anybody has gone to being a student who goes into all of his lessons apart from science, which he now no longer goes into, but he uses that as study time, not necessarily time to be away from other students, but actually to be able to manage his own learning. He has several friendship groups, and And the interest in manga and anime actually took him and his friends to a convention at the beginning of the summer this year, and he went alone without his parents. He just went with his friends and said into a very, very busy, manic, loud, bizarre environment, because these people at this convention are all into manga and anime. They dress up as the characters that they're into, and they role play some of these characters very, very, very different to what we're used to on a daily basis. And he went and he enjoyed that thoroughly and thought it was just the best day of his life. And I can quite honestly say that these friendships were built on the basis of the strategies that he'd been taught, but being able to actually use those in a safe environment, like I said earlier. And as a result of that, his self-esteem has just rocketed. This is a student who wouldn't draw independently because he would only trace. Also, the drawing aspects of as he developed his drawing skills, he would never draw in front of anybody. He would have to go to a booth area and do his drawings there. But very recently, on an open evening that he came back to school to help out with, which you know, as you know, students on the spectrum, 3:15 comes, they're gone. He came back on our last open evening, and he sat and he demonstrated what we do in Manga Club along with a couple of other students, and he sat and drew in front of other people, which he came to me afterwards and said, "Did you see what I did? I've never done that before. I actually did it. I've actually done it." And it's that kind of thing. It's just giving them the opportunities and being able to build on that, really. So this is my view, because we've got the students' view, and obviously we have to have a staff view, a school view. This is a young person who is on the autistic spectrum, James, and at this point he's been encouraged to develop his own skills as an artist. I say this, but he's actually a very, very talented artist, and improving self-esteem is at the heart of what we do, because if our young people on the autistic spectrum have positive and good self-esteem, well then it's the gateway to them feeling confident enough to take risks socially and safely, really. And again, I constantly keep referring to this, that a positive and a safe environment, allowing students to grow personally and know that, you know, they're not going to be the target of ridicule for doing or saying something that's inappropriate or, you know, unexpected. And James, this is his view on Manga Club. I enjoy drawing manga. My favourite is Dragon Ball Z. Drawing manga is something that I am good at, and it's nice when others admire my work. Now, for him to say something like this, because usually in the classroom he struggles, he has a learning difficulty as well as autism. And he struggles in the classroom, he struggles to learn. Everything is a hard chore, he has to work very, very hard at it. Nothing comes easily. And you'll often hear him say, "Oh, I'm no good at this, I'm just so rubbish." And, you know, when they can come to somewhere like this and actually show off their talents and, you know, have people view them positively and make positive comments and say how good he is and, you know, how inspired they are by him, it really, really has boosted his self-esteem to a point where he's much more confident with his own peer group. He's not as shy. So benefits of Manga Club. Improved peer relationships. Well, I've talked a little bit about Hashim, but there are obviously many, many others as well. It's this idea that often they feel like a failure. I've heard that so many times, you know, I'm rubbish, I don't know why I bother, why do I even bother coming into school, you know, nobody likes me, I get everything wrong, it's, you know, and then actually hearing them say, "Oh, actually I've done quite a good job there. I'm really, really proud of myself, and, you know, I'm pleased with that result." It's for some of our students, you think it's something that you're never going to hear them say. But like I say, it's a holistic approach. It's not just one approach, but I think today and other conferences have been to, there's a lot of emphasis on what we can do in the classroom, strategies and structures, but sometimes it's actually the social element. How do we actually provide that safe environment where it's not just students on the autistic spectrum but everybody? An ability to share experiences. Again, there was a situation where one day I was sat in the classroom where we run Manga Club, and it's kind of a place where sort of different students now come to meet each other there. So it's kind of grown and spilt over a little bit. But one day one of our students came in, and Hashim was sat at the table, and he came in and he was just really down, and he was like, oh, you know, and Hashim said to him, oh, what's wrong with you? And he said, oh, he said something really terrible happened at the weekend. He said, a cousin of mine died and he's only 15, and he said, I just feel really like, oh. And Hashim turned around and said, oh, I said, I know that experience. I can understand what you're saying. He said, because that's actually happened to me. And I know what it feels like. So if you ever need to speak to anybody about it, I'm here for you. And this is, like I say, he's in year 11 now, but this is the year 8 student who actually didn't speak to anybody at one point. So that's why we do it, basically. That's one of the reasons why we do it. Emotional regulation. You will have heard a lot about emotional regulation, because quite often when anxiety levels are high with our students on the spectrum, they're not taking anything in, they can't hear you, they need to be in a place where they can feel safe and be given an opportunity to calm down. But within the Manga Club and that kind of social environment, there really isn't that pressure. So already their anxiety levels are at a much lower level. And so when different things happen, they view them differently, they see them differently, and they reflect on them differently, and it gives you a lot to work with. It also gives us an opportunity to teach them how to understand and accept constructive criticism. Again, you say something negative or that's perceived as negative to a young person on the spectrum, it's like, you know, they shut down, you're telling me I'm rubbish. You know, no, that's not what I said. No, you've just said I'm rubbish. You know, I'm rubbish at this. No, you've misinterpreted what I've said. And but in an environment such as this, where they're already have very, very low anxiety levels or nervousness, you can actually work on this. And this is one of the things that we do with a lot of our students, is we give them the opportunity to make mistakes, especially with artwork. It's okay to make a mistake, and show them how to actually correct that mistake or build on it. And if you've made a mistake here, you know, date it, work on to, you know, go on to the next piece of work and date that, and you have a record of how far you've come and the progress that you've made. This is a concept that they can carry over into the rest of their curriculum, because making mistakes in maths, or, you know, even in their workbooks, you know, we have students who, if they make a mistake on a piece of written work, page gets ripped out, got to start again from scratch, you know, and sometimes you never actually get through a task in that particular lesson because they've attempted it so many times, and unless it's perfect on the page gets ripped out and they start again. And how do you teach that? You know, the teacher's like, you know, come on, you've not done your work, you know, it all, you know, escalates and gets out of hand. Whereas in a space like Manga Club, where there are no demands really for a task to be finished or a piece of homework to be handed in, to be able to offer constructive criticism and show them how they can accept it in a safe environment, not in front of a class full of students, really, really very, very powerful. Because again, like I say, it can be that can be carried over into the rest of the curriculum, and it helps them to reach their full potential, really. And being able to take social risks, that is something that a lot of students, you know, if they won't go into the classroom because they're afraid of making a mistake, or will never put the hand up or offer an answer, within these kind of social environments where it is very relaxed, they can take smaller risks and realise that actually, you know, it's not the end of the world, and so the risks then become bigger and bigger, and they take bigger steps. It's all about small steps initially, but that then grows into, it's like a ripple effect, so that those young people then are carrying that forward into the rest of their sort of school life and social life. And one of the biggest benefits is the lower anxiety levels. Because of the sort of counselling and therapeutic interventions and a relaxed environment like this, we do have a lot of time in school where they are achieving really much lower anxiety levels, which means that more challenging work can be done in other areas. So whether it's maths, English or science, doesn't matter. Because of the reduced anxiety levels, a student is much better able to cope in these busy environments. I don't know if any of you remember, Gareth this morning mentioned a young person called Chris, and it took him a whole year to get a reciprocal response from Chris. And it was just, you know, Mr. Morwood would say every day, "How are you, Chris?" You know, nothing, absolutely nothing. And eventually, you know, I think Gareth wore him down. Actually, I think that was what worked there, the strategy that worked there. But this young man, he came to our Manga Day on the Notions of Self Day, and we realised that he had a hidden talent for drawing manga. He's on the autistic spectrum, and he comes there absolutely religiously. He will not miss it. He absolutely loves it. It's the one thing in school he enjoys doing. Everything else, no, don't like it, hates it, could do without it. This one thing is what makes school worthwhile coming into for him, because he gets this nowhere else. He's one of the young people who, separately to Hashim and his group, went to this convention last year and had an absolutely thoroughly fantastic time. And this again is a young person who even now has quite limited interaction and reciprocal communication with his peer group. But he produced this piece of work for me to show you today, and this was his comment that he gave with it. It's a peaceful place to draw, although I'm not entirely sure that's the case all of the time if you watch some of these manga films. But it's a peaceful place to draw. It's nice to talk with other people, which I thought was quite an amazing statement for him to make, because he doesn't really chat very much with people. But he said, no, it's nice to talk to other people in this room, and without manga, it would definitely be very boring at pre-snore. Full stop, that's it. But his confidence with his social skills, his speaking skills, is definitely growing and developing in a way that he's in year 10 now. But like for the past sort of 3+ years, we've been struggling to really help him develop these skills. But more and more, his self-confidence is beginning to come out a little bit more. His artwork has been shown around the school, and he sort of has crossed that over, his artwork. He's managed to cross it over into his other areas of the curriculum. And the art department within our school has been very, very helpful with students who are good at drawing manga and don't really like drawing anything else, in trying to incorporate that into the curriculum, so that again they can build on that and take them out of the manga bit and get them doing the curriculum bit as well. So again, it's something that, as it's developed and as we identify further needs, we can actually utilise them and actually cross them over into the curriculum. So it's beneficial in many different aspects. Also, key thing I think with students on the spectrum, being able to accept responsibility for their part in a situation that has taken place is often very, very difficult. It's very difficult for them to see. They feel persecuted if they're the person who's been told that they're in the wrong. And I've got here, I think that's a little bit more. People with ASC often cannot predict or understand their actions, and may not attribute the end result of their behaviour. Blame is often externalised as they cannot recognise their part in it. So quite often they'll say, oh, you know, it might be the slanty roof in a classroom. I can't be doing with sloping roofs in a classroom, and that classroom's got a sloping roof and it was really annoying me, and that's why I picked up a chair and, you know, woo, where's it gone? You know, so they don't see that actually that was an unrealistic response to a situation. It was somebody else's fault. So what we do work on again is trying to get them to take responsibility for things that they either do or don't do. You know, you've got to tidy up after, you know, Manga. You know, you can't leave it all for somebody else to do. It's about, you know, teaching them these very basic things that we've been trying to get through to them through, you know, these other interventions where we introduce strategies. But how do we actually get them using them? That's been the biggest benefit from Manga Club. And Megan, and you think we actually liaised on this actually with some of the students that we've used. We haven't. Megan is the young lady that Gareth was talking about earlier who, again, very limited interactions with other students. Am I running out of time? You know, and when she was in a bad place, it was just blue chair, either a picture of it or the words, and she'd go there, but that was her coping strategy. She's a member of Manga Club and she works out of our classroom, and her interaction with other students has come on tenfold since being in this group, because I think what she's realised is that people just come in and get on with it regardless of what she's doing, what she's saying, what she's feeling, what she's thinking or acting. And I think because people are not going, oh, what's she doing on the floor down there? You know, because they're not pointing out the negatives and actually just letting her get on with what she needs to do at that point so she can come back into the group. She's really beginning to flourish, and she was very, very keen that I should include this today because she wanted you to know that she loves drawing manga. She didn't know she could draw it. She couldn't when she first came, but she can practice it in Manga Club, and now that she quite enjoys it, and she actually watches it and chats. But if she's actually into watching a video and you try to interrupt it, then you know it's, you know, brick wall, blank wall. But absolutely amazing results. Natasha's journey. Natasha is not on the autistic spectrum. She's just a young person who decided to come and join Manga Club. She couldn't draw. She said, oh, I can't join Manga because I can't draw. I said, oh, no, not at all. We've got strategies for everybody, and we've got books that help from literally beginning stages to advanced stages. So at first we found something she could draw, which was robots. And now, for the very first time here, she drew people, and she never thought she would do that. And she's so proud. Now, it's only a small thing, but she's so proud of herself. And she's a relatively shy girl who's absolutely, you know, coming out of herself because she's pleased and proud, and people are taking an interest. So again, it benefits everybody, not just. So how can we build on what's gone before? Well, we have actually produced a manga comic, which I'm going to have to sort of whiz through a little bit now. The manga comic was a massive undertaking, I have to say. We have a week at the end of each school year, I don't know if anybody else does, where all the students are off timetable, and we decided that we'd produce a comic. We allowed 2 to 3 days for it, but it took about 4 to 4.5 days. But it involved teamwork, tapping into specialist skills, planning, choices. They had to choose characters to go into this comic, so everybody came up with ideas, but not everybody's idea was chosen, as some were rejected, and everybody had to be able to discuss and deal with that. So again, all about teamwork. We were doing things in this group that some of these students could not have done previously, but within the safe environment of this particular club, they were doing these kind of very, very difficult skills, decision-making choices that I don't think you'd be able to get them to do in the classroom. It was an ambitious project, but it was very, very worthwhile. I haven't got any copies of this. I have got a couple of copies with me, but what we're planning to do is put it on the website, on Gareth's website, so it's not actually on there yet. We're in the process of trying to get it on. We're just trying to work out the best way to do it, so that you can have a look at what we did. And within that, there's all the information about what the objectives and the outcomes of that particular project were. And it was to develop the team working skills, to learn to accept constructive criticism, like I say, the rejection of some people's work and the why it was rejected and why somebody else's was chosen over somebody else's and things like that. And also acknowledging, which is one of the things I referred to earlier, was being able to recognise the skills of somebody else, you know, and recognise that, oh, actually somebody is better than me at something else. That's a huge thing. You can't teach it, they have to experience it. You can tell them about it, but you can't actually teach it, they have to experience it. The benefits of the Manga workshop: improved self-esteem of all students. Everyone who took part in it was extremely proud of what they'd done. There's continued growth of the social groups. They have developed and flourished. New friendships have come out of it. Improved confidence, optimism, and also aspirations. They actually aspire now to do other things. What can we do next? What's the next big project we can do? And I have to keep coming up with ideas, which isn't always easy. So again, self-belief, hope, independence, social risk-taking, which I talked about earlier, putting yourself out there. Mistakes can be corrected. You know, it's not the end of the world. A young person not on the spectrum, just one of the peer group in there. He was absolutely fantastic at doing the editing for us. Has significant needs with dyslexia, but absolutely a wizard on Photoshop. So he enjoyed doing it. It was a fun project, and he was proud to be part of it. So again, it was tapping into the skills of some of our students. So where to next? Well, we're always looking for new ideas. Our latest one is to develop our own character, because a lot of the students draw and copy their favourite characters. So what we're now trying to do is get them to think about developing their ideas, and actually you can come up with your own idea for a character and develop that. And this is Hashim, who has, I've got to show you this picture before we finish, because this is kind of sort of the beginning of it really. And he said, I'll never be able to draw my own character. I haven't got the imagination to be able to do it. But he did, and he said it was a very, very hard thing to do, coming up with my own character, and it's taken a very, very long time to complete it. But he said maybe the next one won't be as hard. And that's what I'm saying. It's like a big hurdle. You ask them to do things that they think they can't do, but actually when they do it, the next time, well, actually, the next one might not be as hard. I might actually be able to do this. And they actually surprise themselves. And all of his friends, well, that's not true anymore, but all of his friends are in Manga Club, and school just would be boring without it. So I just wanted to finish on what Hashim had to say. So just a quick review of the session. Yeah, so teaching strategies really is not the whole story. Sort of integrating them into daily life is the key skill. And how do we get them to do that? It's very, very difficult to be able to measure that. But I think we've managed to do that quite a lot through this support of Manga Club. So I hope I provided an opportunity for you to see what it's like for a mainstream school with students on the autistic spectrum. We don't have a specialism in autism at Priestnall. It's just how we've started out, looking at the struggles and the barriers that these students have, and what can we actually do to help them, and that's really where all that's come from, and it's been very, very positive. So thank you for listening. If you have any questions, I'm very happy to answer them. I know I've left it very short of time to do that, but my email is on the bottom here. So if you have any questions, or you'd like any, help with ideas or anything at all, okay. Does anybody have any questions before we finish up? Hi.
You talked earlier, Claire, about the interventions and the 6-week programmes, about sort of developing ability to join in conversations, etc. and so on. Then as we moved on into the afternoon, you talked about how you measure the outcomes of those particular interventions, and you found a way forward, obviously through the club that you've talked about.
Yeah.
What kind of actual specific interventions are you actually using?
Within the club?
Prior to the Manga. The interventions, you spoke about the speech and language therapy one, which obviously is very specific, which is a 6-weekly programme, but then also the sort of social skills type sort of interventions, and you're looking at the transfer obviously and the application of those skills that they're actually getting from that intervention, and obviously you've been able to measure that through the Manga Club. What kinds of interventions are you actually doing prior to the children being in there, and you're
the kind of interventions we're doing are, we have an occupational therapy programme which I haven't actually spoken about today because it was really focusing on the communication and interaction and the Manga Club. But what we do is we look at looking at emotions, feelings, being able to identify their own and other people's.
I understand that you're doing that. I just wondered how you do that. Have you got a very specific programme that you actually follow?
Yes, we do.
Is it one that you've devised yourself as a setting?
As I said in the PowerPoint, it was developed in conjunction with a speech and language therapist that's allocated to Priestnall and myself. And what we did was we looked at the difficulties that our students were having and how could we address those and help them to support that. And that's how the programme was developed. I've not actually gone into detail about the programme today because that's not what this session was about, but I do have further information on that, and I do have a very basic programme that actually I can send to you if you like, or that you can use to sort of develop within your own environment. But basically it was to look at feelings, emotions, it's conversational skills, role play, discussion groups, all of those kind of things that are helping to nurture and underpin and scaffold their skills within, either school or socially, inside school, outside of school.
Yeah. I was just interested to know, sort of, because there are so many programmes out there that have already been written, and
right.
That
well, I think what we did was we looked at, because there is a lot out there, but what we decided to do was look at our own students and what they were actually specifically struggling with, and we in conjunction with the speech and language therapist tried to address all of those things in a very specific way. And once that programme is run, we can then look further at if there are any more additional needs that haven't been addressed within that programme, then we will develop a further programme for that. So if I can help with that, you can always email me, I can forward you any of the information I've got. Okay. Hiya.
Do you get any extra funding for the intervention work that you do? Because I work in a secondary school, and it's great, very impressive what you do. And I went to my head of governors and I said, look, the first thing they would ask, well, cost implications. Yeah.
We don't receive any additional funding for the work that we do at Priestnall with our students on the spectrum. I think having an advocate like Gareth is obviously sort of very, very beneficial, but it's about, he approached the head, said, this is, these are the difficulties that we're experiencing, this is what we want to address, we've got ideas about how we want to do it, and the head teacher said, right, well, let's run with it, let's see how far you get, and and we'll look at the benefits of it, and if it's going to continue, then we'll keep funding it, and that's been going on for about 3 to 4 years now, well, about 4 to 5 years now. But no, we don't, as a school, we don't, this is what I said earlier, we don't receive any additional funding. Sorry. It was probably when the mic was switched off.
I was just wondering how you access the Manga Club? Is it via the internet or is it through yourself? Or?
It's just ourselves. Like I said, there was a little bit of luck involved, which is why I'm quite happy to pass on anything that I can help with, because it was a bit of a fluke how I stumbled across it. I had a daughter who was interested in it and a student who was not communicating with anybody who had a very specific interest in it, and that's how it's evolved. So the club itself is just literally a social club, right. But there is lots of manga out there. But what I will say is, as with any other form of popular media, you do have to, you know, sort of have a look at what's going on, and yeah, you do need to sort of vet it, because there are sort of 12, 15 and all of that kind of thing. So you do have to be a little bit careful on that score, because it goes into, you know, all sorts of things, just like the video games do. But no, it's literally. I've got some basic drawing skills packages that we have used that I'm quite happy to pass on as well. So
would that be all right to email you then?
Pardon?
Would it be all right to email you then?
Yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah, no problem at all. All right, well, okay, if that's fine, thank you everybody for listening. I hope you found it at least interesting or inspirational, or giving you some ideas that you can maybe take forward for your own students. All right, thank you very much.